Hello, everybody. Esper here. This video is actually a little bit different than what I normally do, but some inspiration struck me after that last video that I made. And well, why don't you introduce yourself, Mike, and then we'll see where we go from here.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Esper. I'm Mike. I've been playing with you pretty regularly, playing D&D with you pretty regularly for I would say about 2 years now. So I
Almost
have
two and a half
some
at this point.
yeah, it's been a while. Pretty awesome campaign. It's a long running campaign that I've been running with you. So yeah, it's been great.
Yeah, it's been an
And
awesome campaign. It's had a number of different phases that it's gone through, and there were some rough patches in the beginning, but we
mhm.
eventually hit our stride, and we've been really flowing for a while now.
Yeah. Other than that, just a general gamer slash nerd with opinions.
Cool, cool. Well, let's get into some of those opinions. I have a bunch of different ideas, and I made
hmm
a bunch of notes, but it's going to be impossible to really do all that and at the same time just have like a regular conversation. So
Yeah.
let's see what happens. And I don't know how to quite preface this or set this up, so let me just try to say a kind of I don't know if it's a disclaimer or just a general opening statement. So I'm someone that kind of does things in my own way. I've always been a fairly independent kind of person. So the idea of this video talking with you, and I guess we're going to approach some sensitive topics. It's like, what am I trying to do? I'm not quite sure. I know I want to learn and have an interesting conversation that like addresses topics of substance. But I think I know more what I don't want to do than what I do want to do. The do what exactly the hell I'm doing is a little bit mysterious, but I know what I don't want to do. So like I I'm not trying to virtue signal.
hmm
Like I don't think that it's good to just make some kind of claim or like make some blanket statement or say some slogan or have some kind of label for yourself, and then that automatically is supposed to make you like a better person morally. So I'm not trying to do that.
hmm
I'm not trying to. There's other reasons why I don't like that, because it also kind of gets you into this like corporate politics where you just like, hey, I'm on this bandwagon that has been shuffled in for us. So I don't really like jumping on anyone's bandwagon. But I
hmm
also don't want like the problems on the other end of the spectrum, you could say, like where I don't want to just be an asshole either.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to find some kind of balance between not virtue signal, but also not be this kind of like dismissive. I'm not going to listen to anybody. I do my own thing, blah, like kiss my ass. I don't want that either.
Yeah. I think from so obviously I watched your video. And I think what one of your biggest points is that you are concerned well, we can unpack a bunch of things, but you're concerned with um, the watering down of media, particular focus D&D. In this case, it was the one D&D expansion,
Yeah.
and um, I
You know,
think you
you
have a
know,
bit.
it might be good if I actually just read your comment, and then
Yeah,
that
sure.
way it'll be like the context will be completely obvious.
hmm
Okay, so like you said, I uploaded this video. It's called "A Message to Wizards of the Coast," and in that, I express my concerns about the way things are going with Dungeons and Dragons. The game seems to be getting safer and overly politically correct, and
hmm
it's more and more seeming to be made for more like mass commercial appeal. And I made
hmm
this musical analogy where the game is changing from being like rock or metal to being more like pop. And
Mm-hmm.
you know, a lot of people commented on the video. Some people agreed, some people disagreed, some kind of, you know, in the middle. And your comment stuck out to me. So here's what you said. You said, I appreciate the video, Esper. I think there's a happy medium to be had here. Being super politically correct has definitely watered down media, including D&D. It's an overcorrection due to harmful stereotypes and poor representation in media over the years. I'm glad to see some of those things corrected and people that look like me represented in media, but I can see how we can be going too far in the other direction. What makes D&D one of my favorite gaming systems is that it's so flexible and narrative driven. If a super inclusive game is your jam, by all means have fun. I've even seen this done very well without sacrificing a story with conflict. If you want to go the completely opposite direction, so long as your group is comfortable with it, it's definitely not the game for me, but have a ball. I think what's most important is trust and communication within your group to touch on more gritty topics. A compromise for supporting older, less sensitive Wizards of the Coast content could be providing disclaimers and or trigger warnings with modules. These sensitivities are valid. I hold some myself, and being aware of them is not a bad thing, although I can understand why some core players can feel like they're being left behind.
Yeah. So, I guess if we were to categorize that with agreement versus disagreement, I would say I probably am somewhere in the middle. Um, like I'm not hardcore staunchly, oh, I hate Esper, I'm unfollowing, but I do think we have some I'm not even gonna say disagreements because I think that it's just a perspective from experiences that I've had that you may not have, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I do see, like I said, first of all, let's separate bad writing and lazy writing from like creating more inclusive content, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that the trend is to, follow the PC wave of things. So you change people in older movies, right? Like the race of characters, or or for example, like just like you've alluded to, like kind of forcing ideologies into media. Those things don't have to be forced, right? You can have a strong female character without having to say, I'm creating a strong female character,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so as a person who sees the uh how should I say, uh as a person who sees how like corporations pander to people to get them to buy stuff, I can see how that um may not necessarily be the long-term like solution. um and it also may not even be genuine, right? They see sales numbers for this type of commercial, and so
Mm-hmm.
they make that type of
A lot
commercial.
of my a lot of my like local close friends, that's
Mhm.
the kind of the common point that they've all made is
Mhm.
that, you know, Wizards of the Coast ultimately is a business, and they're going to do what they think is the smartest business move. And, well, that may take the game in a direction that makes
Mhm.
us not like it as much anymore because it's safer. Like,
Yeah.
that's really what I don't want. When I'm talking about, I don't want the game to get watered down. Uh, I don't want it to end up being, you know, safe dungeons and approved dragons.
Yeah. So
Uh,
like I
Now,
guess what I
you
would say.
actually said something that is a big note that I made prior to this conversation. That really, what's at the like the core of all of this is the quality of the writing.
Mm-hmm.
Because uh, I made a note, and forgive me for reading here.
No, you're cool.
Yeah, here's what I said. I think what's most important are a good story, good writing, good characters. If it's a game, good rules. And what I
Mm-hmm.
mean by good is high quality, meaningful, artistic, interesting, etc. The culture or the setting or the subject matter, that
Mm-hmm.
certainly can be important. But if the work is great, then, kind of any subject matter or any setting is going to be cool. And if the work is bad, if the writing is bad, then, no setting is going to save that. It's still going to
Yeah,
be, boring or annoying or whatever. So it's like quality is primary and setting is secondary.
yeah. And so I get that. And I think that um I would say that is likely secondary to, I mean, that is likely primary over political agenda. What I mean by that is that without inserting political agenda, there are still really lazy rewrites. I've not seen
Mm-hmm.
a big movie that's not just a copy of some other movie like the Marvel's franchise
Sure.
or things like that that are just like basically this makes billions of dollars. Let's just keep doing that until
Sure.
people realize that they're just basically doing the same movie over again.
Right.
Um,
Here's an
and
example of something that is not politically correct and it's not watered down or safe, really, but it was
mhm,
bad writing, so it sucked. Was the remake of the Conan movie. It was some years ago now. Jason Momoa played Conan, and I really like Conan. Like Robert E. Howard's Conan stories are an inspiration of mine. It's
mhm.
not a politically correct movie. It's not made to be safe and kid friendly.
Yeah,
But it was a terrible movie. It was garbage. It just
yeah. Didn't even know it existed.
bad
Um,
writing, bad just they fumbled it. It sucks because there were so many amazing Conan stories, and they didn't use any
mhm.
of them. They just kind of made up their own thing, and yeah, I couldn't
Yeah.
even finish it in one setting. I had to like make myself go back to it in pieces to even get through it.
Yeah, and so I think um like I think that's separate, right? And so I hear like people talking about like for example the changes of how races are handled in the one D&D. That's the biggest kind of gripe I have with the argument people or like the people who are against it is a you don't even have to use those race those race rules. That's kind of the point, right? Is that you could still just use the 5e race rules.
Mm-hmm.
But from my perspective, that's kind of where part of what I alluded to about harmful stereotypes. So you've played with me for quite some time,
Yeah,
and I'm sure you know that I have issues with uh like I don't know, like I would say like not like so kind of I guess it would be low key imperialism, but and I'll preface this with I don't have problems with racist topics in games as long as I am empowered to like subvert and or overcome them, right?
mm-hmm.
So like one of my biggest games, the one of the themes was a country that was based on slavery.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my favorite NPCs that I've ever made was a lore bard that was inspired by Frederick Douglass. So I read
Mm-hmm.
the autobiography of Frederick Douglass, and that inspired me to create that character. He went on to incite a slave revolt, and that was one of the most memorable parts of that campaign. And so like I say that to say like I don't shy away from bad topics. I even would say that the way
Like
that I
mature themes.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
like the way that I uh would my writing style is usually some sort of consideration of the human condition.
Mm-hmm.
And I've experienced both the best and worst of humanity. And so I can objectively look at different parts of that and analyze that in a story that I'm writing or collaborating with other players. So I would say the most important thing about that scene and that arc was that I had the consent of the people playing, and that they weren't going to be uncomfortable by that topic or even the possibility of there was one point where they were almost legitimately captured as slaves, and they survived and they won, but I wasn't going to pull it, like I wasn't going to coddle them and save them from that experience. Like
Mm-hmm.
they would have to get out on their, I would give them mechanics to escape on their own merit.
Mm-hmm.
But before I even touched that topic, I said, "Hey, these are some themes that this game may have, and you know, are you okay with that?"
Sure.
And they were.
So this is a game that
So
you were the game
yeah, this is
master.
my
You were
yeah,
running
one
it.
of my games that I was running.
Uh-huh.
So um,
So you
I'm
talked to the
saying,
group ahead of time and you said,
yeah,
"Hey, here's my idea for this story and I think it could be a powerful story,
mm-hmm,
but is does this cross the line for anybody?"
mm-hmm, yeah, and so even one of my friends, because I and especially consulted him first because he started out as a slave. That was his backstory.
Yeah.
And
It's a
so
compelling backstory, man.
yeah, and
Like
he was like this,
that's super strong motivation.
yeah, and so it was he was an integral part in the revolt. He ended up killing one of the worst, like, of the like slave drivers or slave sellers. He personally cut that guy's head off.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it was
Satisfying
very,
moment, I
yeah, it's
imagine.
very satisfying and
Yeah.
empowering story. And so, um, but I was only able to necessarily touch that because I was able to have a localized connection with my group
Sure.
that Wizard of the Coast can't possibly do.
Right.
They can't say, "Hey, everybody that plays D&D, I'm gonna have some sort of a sketchy game module." Well, they actually can, which leads to what I was saying is that maybe they should have some sort of, if they want to support like the older content, have like a mature content warning or like a trigger warning for certain types of things, right?
Are you familiar with the Book of Vile Darkness from 3rd edition?
I have heard of it. I've heard that it's pretty hardcore,
So I
but
recently was able to pick up a copy of it. I found a copy to buy, a physical one, and I'm rereading it. It's been years, and I want to make a video about it. Um, what they did with that book, since it deals with a lot of mature topics, is they put a sticker on the book that said, like it was a warning, like a warning sticker, like what you would see on a CD. I don't know if people buy CDs anymore, but like how a movie, if you buy a DVD or a Blu-ray, it has like the movie rating on it. And so it like
yeah,
warned people like, hey, this is for a mature audience. And it's it's a great it's a great book in its own way. And
yeah,
it spends time in the beginning of the book addressing the reader. Like this book is gonna go to dark places. It's dealing with evil. It's all about evil.
hmm,
The idea though is that it's to help you understand evil in the context of it being the enemy that the heroes overcome, or
yeah,
maybe they kind of fall into it for a while, and maybe the players there's I think there is constructive value in exploring evil characters and dark scenarios,
yeah,
because it gives you a perspective on things, and you kind of get this little glimpse of hell, and you get this little taste of what is that like, because
hmm,
we've all got that in us, man. We all
yeah,
do, all humans. I don't care who the person, I don't care who you are, not you specifically you, but anyone, I don't care who they are, they've got
hmm,
at least something in them that they could do something terrible or monstrous.
Yeah.
Like, just because we live in the year 2022 doesn't mean that we're somehow different or better than the humans that came before us that committed atrocities. We just happen to
Yeah.
have been born in this place and time. So D&D and the role playing experience can give you this like virtual world look at that, and you can see like, whoa, I'm capable of that. And you, in a way, it's like, it's not warning you. What is it? It's like you process that little bit of your shadow,
Yeah.
and you're
I
like,
think you're
I'm not blind to that or running away from it anymore. Or maybe I'm a little bit closer to being able uh, to see it for what it is. And that's a way to not become a monster, is to be aware that you have the potential to be a monster.
yeah, it's like the purge, right? I mean, I don't know if that necessarily works,
Like
but
getting it out of your system.
yeah, getting it out of your system once a year, like the movie The Purge, right?
Mm-hmm.
But and yeah, I very much enjoy playing monsters and plotting evil plots as a DM, and even maybe like venturing into a more evil character, right? So like I think we're good on like evil is evil, and evil is not necessarily doesn't necessarily care about your sensitivities, right? That's the whole point. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
not torture if you're cool with it, right?
How
So
can something be a demon if it's like, um, like thoughtful and considerate?
yeah,
That
I think
doesn't make
my
any
issues
sense.
are yeah, I think my issues are more with like humanoid races and like generalizations. So like we were
Mm-hmm.
talking about the rule system, right? Like
Sure. Can we kind of go back to something you were talking about? Because I have
yeah,
some
sure.
questions. So I'll just kind of be blunt here. The campaign where
Mhm.
everyone started off with slaves, were the players black?
So one of them that was the one that actually was the slave, and that's why I was like, dude, like I'm not making you do this. He was like he actually got into it. It was like I'm cool with it. This is a
Uh
cool
huh.
backstory. Um, most of them, well, one was Chinese and the rest were white.
Okay.
And so even then, that gave them uh
I had a suspicion. I mean, you didn't just come out and say
yeah,
it, but that was
yeah.
my my thought.
But
So,
even then for me, I would say it even gave me the opportunity to express some of how should I say, some of the emotional scars that I have
mm-hmm.
from being a person from the South and kind of seeing a lot of the history that comes from that.
Yeah,
Expressing that to people who are my friends that also happen to be white and may not have that experience as me. They're from Washington State. So it's
yeah,
like, a whole different experience. And they were very cool about it. Like it made me feel better to get that out, and it also gave them a real heartfelt story that I created. And also like one of them even was like I should publish it. So
mm-hmm.
um
There is something powerful about that. Um,
mhm.
so let's keep, actually, if you don't mind, let's keep going in this vein, because I'd like to kind of dig into these sort of
Yeah.
deeper things. So
Mhm.
um, you were the DM.
Mhm.
Uh, one player was also black, another player was Asian, and then the other players were Caucasian. Um,
Mhm.
Slavery, of
Mhm.
course, is like all across the board, and all essentially all
Yeah.
peoples practiced it,
Mhm.
unfortunately. But there, now here's, this is my best understanding of things. Do you need a sec?
Listening. Yeah, my dog just is barking. I was listening though.
Okay. So here's my best understanding of things, and I'm probably going to say something dumb, but just bear with me.
Mhm.
It seems to me that even though slavery kind of happened to everyone,
Mhm.
there's a particular sensitivity with black folks regarding that because it's like most recent and present, whereas, like ancient Greeks or something, that seems farther removed. There's this kind of buffer zone, and you don't feel such a connection. But when it comes to black folks, it's like that was recent. I mean, pretty recent. And
Yeah.
like, of course, there's like different types of slavery and degrees and stuff. And that seemed to be a particularly brutal
Hmm.
one. Like, not that
Yeah.
any one wasn't, not that there was a kind of slavery that was okay, but like
Hmm.
some certainly must have been worse than others.
Definitely. Um, and so
Does that
yeah,
seem like a fair assessment as to why that is such a touchy subject or sensitive subject?
yeah. I mean, I would say, especially from my perspective, because it is something I can directly trace back to like my family, or like even like just the way that as an American, a Southern American, the way that like you can literally like walk down the streets with like Confederate generals statues up, and also like um just know that certain families had ownership over your ancestors that you can actually go to a bar with, right? And so it's like, or even I guess I'll even say it better in that um there are also a lot of laws that were put in place that happened, like my mom was dealing with this stuff, right?
Sure.
That were um they were categorically um they were categorically created to disenfranchise certain ethnic groups, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I have more of a touchy subject with that because of my background.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I also have in my research of trying to be able to compartmentalize this as a historical event, right? Um, can say yes, slavery sucks in general, right? Um, and that it shouldn't happen to anybody, right? Um, and so even in the case of this game, which is a good point, I didn't like make it a specific racial thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I made it a anybody in the lands that happen to get captured by this kingdom
Mm-hmm.
could be enslaved. So they
Yeah, more of a
it wasn't,
classical or
yeah,
antiquity form of it.
yeah. But I and so it wasn't like a specific racial agenda. It was
Right.
slavery sucks. This group of people led by a very terrible king benefit from it, and also the game was very sandboxy, because so they could have chosen to avoid this entirely,
Mm-hmm.
but um basically it was a objectively bad thing that this kingdom was doing, and the party decided of their own volition to do something about it. So it wasn't like I have this agenda. I built this kingdom knowing that they did this type of practice, and I alluded to it several times.
Mm-hmm.
And that guy wasn't the king, was not necessarily even the big bad of the campaign. It was supposed to be a lich, but they like hyper focused on this king and ended up basically destroying his kingdom, and fighting him, and a bunch of different stuff. So um yeah, like, and so that's like, I think I wanted to, at least for me, I think I did this well, and other people may or may not agree, but I think I handled it well in that I didn't necessarily make it about me or my sensitivities. I just had an emotion about a thing and turned it into a story.
Mm-hmm.
And so the core theme of the story came from my emotion about this thing, but I also, as a dungeon master, allowed the party to basically push forward the story. Um, and so um, yeah, so that's that. I guess is that, like I said, I think if I'm looking at it from my perspective, slavery is bad. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter who the person that is enslaving you is. That is a bad thing.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that's a fair way of putting it, right? I mean,
mhm,
we could like write a list of like these things are evil,
mhm.
these things are, you know, maybe have a gray area, and then these things are good. So pretty sure slavery is going to always fall in the evil column.
Yeah, I hope so.
It's
I
right,
wouldn't
but
want
I
to be
mean,
in that guy's.
think of like stealing.
Yeah,
Typically, stealing is going to be evil, but depending on the context, it might be gray, and there also maybe would be a context where it's good.
yeah. I would say honestly, in another perspective, I grew up in New Orleans and I went through Katrina, and a lot of people uh basically took food to survive from grocery stores. That is technically stealing, right?
Yeah,
But you got to do what you got to do when the whole city shuts down.
yeah, that's
So,
where it starts to get into the gray area
yeah.
because when does it stop being crime and when does it start being survival?
Hmm. Yeah.
Or
So,
okay, how could stealing be objectively in the good column? Well, D&D gives us those sorts of things all the time. You know, you find
yeah.
some monster or some terrible thing that is like you know a vampire who's
Hmm.
by night killing people and drinking their blood, and you hunt down the vampire and you kill the vampire, and that's a feat in
Yeah.
of itself. And you take the treasure. I mean, that was like the vampire's castle and his treasure and stuff, his belongings.
Yeah.
But you go and you kill him and you take that stuff for you. But that seems
Mhm.
good, right? And like
Yeah.
the especially if the characters are good aligned, they're going to do something good with that treasure, right?
Yeah.
Like they go and buy from the artisans and the blacksmith, and maybe they even, uh, I don't know, build an orphanage. I'm not sure. I've seen characters like go in
Hmm.
like at high levels and they have a lot of money, go into a town and just like give money to the beggars on the street, just like shower them with gold coins.
Yeah. Or honestly, like if that evil character had some sort of weapon of mass destruction or something, or a book that would wipe out
Oh,
half of a
sure.
country,
Yeah.
stealing that is definitely a good thing.
There you go.
And, hopefully subsequently destroying it, right? So, yeah, I mean, I I think that's kind of where I lie as far as like, I think things have spectrums, right? And so, kind of talking about the overcorrections thing, I think um the spectrum in my perspective may have been farther on the others in another direction than I would have liked for most of my childhood, and probably a lot before that. I mean, I watched movies that I loved as a kid and I still can like appreciate them, but kind of cringe sometimes at like some of the things that people got away with, like in movies in like the 80s and 90s, right? And so that doesn't take away from the work, right, per se, or even like uh another good example is and this is kind of way far back, but like what's that guy's name? Hey, dang, I just of like Lovecraft. Lovecraft was a huge
Lovecraft.
racist, and he also wrote some pretty good books, right? Um, and so like I don't think him being a huge racist necessarily took from the quality of his writing.
Mm-hmm.
Some of his writings have made me cringe, even like definitely still to this day. Like there's certain books that I'm like, dude, like really? But or just certain the way that he approached certain like especially like representing like African Americans
Mm-hmm.
is pretty cringy. Or
Yeah.
he even like yeah, so like
Even though he wasn't writing about what would we call that? Like he was like that wasn't the main thrust of his writings. He was writing horror stories. So the main
yeah,
thrust is to write horror. It wasn't he wasn't really writing about race topics.
yeah,
But yeah, I remember some parts in Reanimator where I was like, okay, that's dehumanizing the way that he phrased that.
yeah. And so I think that's kind of what I'm referencing is that like I think more representation in media has created more of a sensitivity to how other people's cultures are represented, and I think that's a good thing. So like
You think
uh
overall it's a net good?
I think it's a net good. I
Mm-hmm.
think that we could get better at it, but I think people are learning to approach topics that can ruffle feathers more tactfully.
Hmm.
So
This is just my own observations, but what I see happening is that just media in general, movies,
mhm,
games, books, they seem more concerned with the the sensitivity, the cultural sensitivities part, and less
mhm,
concerned with like actually getting into the cool stuff about the culture.
yeah,
Because that for me was always the main reason to have different cultures in a D&D setting or a book, because cultures are interesting. Like I
yes,
personally really find cultures fascinating. The history,
mhm,
the legends and mythologies, the architecture, the languages, the music, the different kinds of clothes and costumes and characters, and like that's just humans are so fascinating. I really am
yeah,
very fascinated with humans. So that I like that to be the focus. But it seems to me that things have gone more in just, hey, look at us, we're sensitive about this culture. We don't really care about learning that much about it or do anything cool with it. It's just
mhm,
like we've got the costume of that culture and we virtue signal. And so it's like, boonk, check mark, done.
yeah. We included X person in our show, and like it's like the diversity pictures on websites, right?
Like
Is
stock
you have
photo stuff that you'd
yeah,
find in middle school or textbooks or something.
yeah, and so I will say that those have become more diverse over time as well.
Mm-hmm.
But so that is another point. But what I will say is that I think it can be done well. So one example, I follow this like podcast that is a probably it's pretty inclusive in like how they tell stories, but they also like so one campaign they did was like based on like a alternate New York state, right? So it was more of a modern kind of thing. And he had multiple different cultures, like New York is a multicultural city, right? And but what he did was when he would so he was a Jewish man, and before he would touch on a certain other person's community, he would consult people from that community. He even sometimes would hire sensitivity coaches, or I forgot exactly what he called it, but basically a
Yeah,
person.
sensitivity. I think sensitivity coach is right. Which
Mhm,
I personally that term kind of annoys me, but
mhm,
like I get the point of it. Like, how can you be aware of the perspective of another culture if you are not
yeah,
from that culture, right? Like my wife's Brazilian,
Mm-hmm.
And I've really gotten to know Brazilian culture over the last several years. And it's like I can see things kind of from another perspective now. And it's like certain things to a Brazilian might be something that would bother them or seem like annoying or stupid or
Yeah.
like a rude thing. But then other things is like not a big deal, or it just like it just runs off their back like water. But an American might get get all you know all in a fuss about it.
Yeah. Exactly. So
So
I think. Oh, I'm sorry.
yeah, I mean we could. I guess it's the sensitivity word that maybe it's not even the word sensitivity. What is it that something about it kind of rubs me the wrong way? I'm not sure what it
Maybe it
is.
sounds punitive. I think a lot of people, like, let's say in corporate environments where this is very necessary,
Mm-hmm.
um, as a person who's worked in corporate environments, uh, racial sensitivity training is very, very important because you are working in a multicultural environment and you need to be able to. I think diversity in the workplace is good because you have many ideas, but with that comes many different ways to offend people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So um it does sound punitive when it's like, oh, this guy said something and now he has to go to sensitivity training,
Mm-hmm.
but I would say
It might
it's
seem
prevent.
unbalanced.
Yeah,
Like
and I could see that
there's the
too.
sensitivity, but where's the like that's one side of the coin. Where's the
Uh-huh.
other side of the coin?
What would the
Like
other side be?
like strengthening and encouraging.
Yes. And so
We
yeah.
need both. I mean, I think ideally a fully realized person has both. You have your strong side and your courage, and you
Hmm.
also have your your sensitive side. I mean, that's kind of what I'm trying to do here. Uh,
Yeah.
I don't really like how D&D and media in general has become too what in my opinion too politically correct and too sensitive, but
Hmm.
also I think it's not good to just like insult people and just call them crybabies. Like
Yeah.
that doesn't help anything. And if I'm unwilling to even consider, I think I said this to you in a message, like if I'm unwilling to even consider somebody else's perspective,
Hmm.
then am I just willfully being ignorant? Like that doesn't seem like a good idea either.
Yeah. I think that people don't necessarily want to go through the discomfort of having these kind of tough conversations where you may say, "Hey, maybe I am doing something wrong," right?
Hmm.
People hate that shit.
Well, nobody wants to,
Yeah,
like in front of other people, be
yeah,
wrong. That's,
yeah,
I think, a
and I get
natural
that.
human instinct.
Yeah, and so when I kind of said it, it seems more punitive. It's like saying you're wrong, the way you do things is wrong. Be like us, right? And
You old ogre, like
yeah, and so
you got
I
to
don't
change the
necessarily.
way you see the world. Let us change your reality for you. So
Mhm,
maybe that's it because I mean, I, if I really like break it down and think about it, cultural
mhm,
sensitivity. I mean, I guess I'm a pretty sensitive person. I would say I am more sensitive than the average guy. I'm an artist. I'm very open.
mhm. Yeah.
Um, the cultural part also is great, and I do that as well. Like
Mhm,
pretty regularly will talk to people, and luckily my YouTube channel facilitates this. I'll meet people and have Zoom calls with them from different cultures around the world, and like just kind of get the get the gist of things from the real
yeah.
person, like what's the spirit of your like I recently talked to a Romanian woman and we're going to talk
Mhm,
again soon, and I'm like, give me the spirit of the Romanian people and tell me about like Romanian folklore and like your cultural characters and your heroes and your monsters, and
Yeah.
Like that helps me as a writer.
Yes.
So cultures are super interesting and people are interesting. So
Hmm.
I think what ruffles me about the sensitivity training is it feels like there's some group and they have their own like ideas and politics and philosophies, and they're
Hmm.
like, we're gonna mold you into our way because our way is better, and you are wrong, bad man.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, if we're being honest, I have been guilty of falling into that camp at times, right? Thinking that, you know, certain ideologies are problematic or dangerous to me or something like that, which they can be. But I also would say that, as far as I was saying about the generalizations of characters, right? Not all people who are from a certain background are a certain way or are necessarily going to do anything to me, right? Um and
Mm-hmm.
so I do think that um it is important to expose, and this is again only from a person from the United States standpoint, right?
Yeah,
Um Most Americans have not left America, right? So
yeah.
I
Or
I,
even if
I
they
could
do physically leave America, they still haven't left America.
yeah, they go to a resort or whatever and eat cheeseburgers, right?
Mm-hmm. Or they're
So
just
like,
with their American group, speaking
yeah,
American English, looking at things from an American tourist perspective, taking
yeah,
photographs,
exactly.
and
So
whatever. Enjoy your vacation, cool. But
yeah, that's not cultural
it's
exchange though.
it's not the same as uh, you know, getting into the marrow of the bones of a different
Yeah,
people. I mean, every language, every culture has a spirit to it.
yeah. And so I would say that my approach to the way I look at the world has heavily influenced by the travels that I've had. And we've kind of talked about this before,
Mm-hmm.
but like, I've experienced the world from many different perspectives that are foreign to me or just straight up weird in my perspective of how I would approach certain things, right? And then, but then I become like, oh, I love this, or, you know, this is interesting. And so the more I get more immersed in the culture, and I feel like you have a similar streak to you in that your approaches to culture are out of curiosity and interest.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so you are going to do your homework. So you may not necessarily, you probably should consult with somebody from that culture before you like use their culture for like a
Product or something.
inspiration for your product,
Yeah.
but you're more likely to do it justice than, because we talked about bad writing. The other side of bad writing is, you know, we're going to boil these stereotypes of things and just put them in a thing, in a show or a movie or a game, right?
Yeah, and it just becomes
And
a costume. It's just a
yeah.
facade, just a superficial appearance of
Hmm.
something, but inside, it's
So,
it's no different. You've just written, you know, you're just cosplaying.
yeah, and so I might be dancing on fire coals by bringing up like cultural appropriation, but like I would say that there is definitely a difference between appreciating a culture and appropriating it. And like, so for example, like somebody just wearing, like, I would say cultural appropriation actually does injustice and waters down that culture to like you said, a costume, or you know like a TV show or something. And so you're not doing that culture justice just because you include that type of person in your media. I think what does it justice is, actually understanding what you're talking about before you create a thing out of it.
Right. How I typically write things, whether for
Hmm.
D&D or for just writing like short stories, and I've been working on these fantasy novels, is I do follow a pretty classic setup or classic, I don't know what to call it, model. It's not really a model, just, the way that actual history was, where different regions have their different cultures and different kinds of people and different ethnicities.
Mhm.
And, maybe there are a few kind of big hub cities that are a little more, I wouldn't say cosmopolitan, that sounds too modern, but like they've got trade coming in from all over the world. So you will see a bunch of different kinds of people there. But
Mhm.
that's kind of the rarity. That's like whoa, that's the jewel of civilization. And then the most of the world is just the way the world was. Everyone lives in their own region and they look a way, like darker skinned people are in places of the world where there's more sunlight because you don't want your skin to get roasted.
Mhm.
And people in the darker, colder areas have paler complexions. So there's a kind of uh, biological component to it.
Absolutely.
So that's just sort of the baseline way that I operate. But now
Mhm.
the way things have been going for a while in media is to discard that, and you don't have to. It's like it doesn't matter. We don't have to explain anything. Just don't let's just abandon anything that seems historical or biological, and
Yeah.
we just have every race like in this fantasy medieval type city, and
Mhm.
here's a black dude, here's a white dude, here's an Asian dude, here's a you know tan skinned, some what do we call it, ambiguous complexion, and
Mhm.
like no one says anything about it. There's no mentioning. It's just like
Yeah.
just just they just don't even
Yeah.
touch it. I just like let's just go, and there's everybody. Just the whole bag of Skittles is here.
Mhm. So I
It's
think, yeah, I get it. I think we're just saying it's like if you want to if you want to have more of a diverse cast, you would it would be better for you to have a narrative design structure for that to happen.
I think
Like,
people should be able to create just with freely, right? If you want to
mhm,
make that setting that I just described, where every city is bag of Skittles city, everyone should have their freedom. You can make that, but
mhm,
you shouldn't just expect that, oh, just because I've done that, I'm somehow more advanced or that makes me better. And then other traditional ways are worse or, somehow corrupt just innately.
mhm. Yeah,
And
I agree.
you kind of touched on this in your comment that you could do that well. Like Bazagon in my Ikoria setting is that way. It's had
Mhm,
different groups immigrate there and all kinds of different waves of conquest over time. And there's a massive variety of different types of fantasy races that live there. And then like
mhm,
the what would we call those ethnicities or whatever within the different, like the different kinds of humans, the different kinds of elves, the different kinds of dwarves.
mhm.
And some of them do keep to their own district, and then other districts are more mixed together.
Yeah.
And that brings a kind of lore to the world or to that part of the world.
Yeah. Your setting feels real. I mean, I've played in it for years and watched other people playing it. So it does feel organic. And so this isn't really a commentary on the way that you write. Like, like I don't have a problem with the stuff that you put out, right? And like even like the book that you had, it was even then was just various different types of artwork with different types of people in there, right?
The
So
Emporium.
yeah.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I thought that was cool. Hence the talking about people that look like me in media, right? It it doesn't you don't have to do that. I don't think that you did it so that I'm sure that, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure you didn't just do that to get brownie points from people to buy your book.
I certainly hope I didn't do it that way. um,
I'm pretty sure you did.
I,
But
I really operate off of inspiration,
mhm,
and I have to feel the inspiration. Like the inspiration has to come to me, and a character has to, in some way, at least some little way, speak to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know who that character is going to be. It could be anything coming to me. So sometimes an idea for a character will come to me, and I do know like the skin color of that character or a kind of real world culture that has
Mm-hmm.
inspired it or kind of influenced it, even though it's a fantasy world. There's like, okay, that's
Mm-hmm.
seems to be kind of inspired by such and such. Sometimes it comes that way, and I would say to the artists, this character, has this physical description, and then other times, I I didn't have any idea of what the character looked like, and I would just leave it in the artist's hands. I wouldn't even say anything. I would just say,
Mm-hmm.
that we need an adventuring party going into a cave, and there's a door with like runes and traps
Mm-hmm.
on it, and it's it seems a dangerous, shadowy, dark, gloomy cave, and then the artist would just do whatever inspiration came to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, yeah, I don't
I
think
didn't have
that,
like a spreadsheet that was like, okay, I got to make sure I have this amount of this and this amount of this type of person, and
yeah,
I didn't do that.
I'm sure you didn't. Like, that's what I guess that's my point is like, it can be done well without necessarily trying to sell stuff, right? So I don't like companies pandering to me because they think I'm gonna buy more stuff from them, especially because they're huge hypocrites and have done the opposite for several years, right? So
Hmm.
it's like now you care because enough people who have money care, right?
That would be a good
That
slogan, like a new ad campaign.
yeah,
Now we care.
exactly. So like, you know, I mean, I definitely feel like that is a problem, right? Like being creating the image of caring about inclusivity for money. Um, I do think that some people in those organizations actually do care about inclusivity.
I'm sure. Yeah.
I would even posit that, Wizards has been very careful about the way that they're creating the new media that they create. And I would say that they probably had, like we talked about, the sensitivity coach kind of deal. I
Hmm.
guarantee you there are some consultants that have given them some insight as to maybe some of the more problematic ways that they've written things or like represented like whole races of characters, right? And so I think they're like I said, I think people are
Can
trying.
you go into that just a little bit, like
Yeah.
from your
So,
perspective? Okay, give me your perspective as a black guy playing D and
mhm,
D, a game that largely, the roots of it is like European history and European
yeah.
mythology. Okay,
So,
so is there something that's stuck out to you, like that
and there's good and
seems
bad.
like a dumb,
Yeah,
ignorant way to portray something?
there's good and bad, right? So I think the thing with orcs is pretty bad. Like you have -2 intelligence or whatever. They're kind of like a tribal culture, and so it just kind of seems colonial to me. Like these people are savages. I've even had personal gripes with like when we play games when people say certain things like and I've learned to like be like, oh, okay, when certain people say, oh, this is like a savage kind of thing, right? It kind of it kind of it kind of it kind of makes me cringe a bit sometimes. But um like so personally, like I said, the thing with the orcs or even like half orcs is like kind of cringy as far as like, oh, this tribal society is inherently evil. Any race that's inherent, like humanoid race, I get like monsters, but any like humanoid race that's inherently evil or stupid or something like that, like a lot of times that is done pretty poorly.
Hmm.
So, but I will say,
Humanoid. This is the humanoid
yeah,
creature type.
yeah. So like
What about like
especially
a troglodyte or lizard folk or sawagan?
I think so, and that's the thing, right? Is that they are supposed to be like more alien in ideology to a human, like the way that we think, right?
There
And
are you
so
saying those are like kind of the like that's the far end of what you could even consider a humanoid?
I would say, I mean, I haven't
Like they're
really messed
almost
with
more of
like,
a monstrosity thing.
yeah, I would say that like, um, and if you're trying to like play that type of group, right? I think that there should always be room to subvert those expectations, not just to do it, but like so one example of kind of cringy but actually done well is Driz Dorden, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like so I remember reading this as a kid and like dog Driz can't get a break. Like so it's like, you know, you go everywhere and people look down on you because you're a dark elf, right? Even though he's like the hero of the story,
Mm-hmm.
right? And he's doing objective acts of good. Um, and I even remember, and I don't quote me on this, but R.A. Salvatore actually kind of talked about this and kind of said he was kind of changing some stuff about how dark elves are represented and things like that. But like, I think what it is like they've basically typecast this group of people as like one just terrible thing, and there's no other way that this group of people can be. And you know, he wrote Driz, which was the I love that character because he subverted those stereotypes, right? And
I'm not a
so,
Drist expert.
mhm,
Uh, Many years ago, I went
mhm.
through the original trilogy. I guess we call it the Homeland trilogy, or is Homeland just the first book? But the first three,
um,
when he's in Minzenbaranzan and up until
yeah,
he gets out of Minzenbaranzan,
mhm,
and at that time, my kind of how would I say this? Kind of no external influence, no social media influence or anything, just kind of my own genuine take on it was like, this is a awesome setting. Like this
mhm,
setting, this Mizabaranzan, this race, the Drow race, right? It was like,
mhm.
whoa, it was so strong.
Yeah,
And then the Drist, like you said, he's like this. I don't know if we'd consider him chaotic good, but sort of like a rebellious
yeah,
character, but with a moral compass or a conscience.
mhm,
And he was very stylish and dashing and like an awesome warrior. And he had
mhm.
Gwynwavir, the magical panther, and it's like, whoa, this is really cool.
Yeah,
I don't know if I quite feel the same because it seems to be kind of
yeah,
overdone. Here's my just kind of off the cuff hypothesis. The Drow race as written with that, like the kind of old school way the Drow race is done and Menza Baranzan and all that, it's so good. Like the storytelling is so strong, and we
mhm,
just no one ever made anything as good or as strong as that. So they're just like they just
yeah,
stuck with that one note. It was like a one trick pony.
yeah.
But if
And
someone would
so I
have written
agree.
like, here's, you know, Kathinzo Baranzan, and they have a different religion and a different culture, but it's also as strong of a story, like we would
Mhm.
like that would have been better, right? Like,
Yeah. And I think so like I'm not a Driz expert either, and it's been very long time since I read any of the books. Um but I think like that was kind of a point, like so I'm not crushing the Drow, right? Especially like that one city, and like you said, they had missed an opportunity to make different types of Drow cities and Drow cultures, and so it ended up being one dimensional as like this is what a drow is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the trope in D&D is like if you play a drow, everybody's gonna hate you and think you're gonna steal their shit or kill them
Yeah.
or whatever.
So
And
this is gonna be a little bit of a tangent, but hopefully you'll go on it with me, and hopefully we can go back to the Drow.
yeah.
Darkness. Like humans are daytime creatures. We're daytime
Yeah.
animals. We see by day. We need daylight. We're diurnal. And then
Mm-hmm.
nighttime we can't see very well, and it gets more dangerous for us. And like you can't really do anything. Now, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
after like electricity and the modern world that we live in, you can do anything you want at night, and we can produce artificial light. But that doesn't change the fact that for hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years, we evolved essentially being blind and terrified at night, and you got to like huddle inside and like
Mm-hmm.
we're very highly disadvantaged at night, and there are things that go bump out there that can kill you. And part of that I think is just our imagination too, right? We probably
Yeah.
imagine spooky things.
Mm-hmm.
So there is an innate, just natural human association with darkness and uh, bad or threatening, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that naturally will manifest when creatives come up with fictional beings and fictional worlds. There's going to be this association where the darkness is the enemy and the dark thing is like the scary thing.
Mm-hmm.
But somehow, and I'm sure there are reasons for this, somehow that has become kind of mingled now with a modern day uh, consciousness or awareness about
Yeah.
racism, where it's like, whoa, no, we don't want to be racist anymore, or we want to reduce racism uh, because we're trying to keep our society advancing as much as we can, which is a good thing. And we're getting more sophisticated, and we got a lot of people living together, and different types of people living together. So yeah, like let's keep working on that. But how it's
Yeah.
like we it's complicated. I showed my wife. My wife, by the way, is not a gamer. She's about like the least gamer person on earth. So she doesn't know about D&D and different fantasy races and stuff, fantasy creatures. She's pretty dark skinned. She's like half black or maybe 40% black. And then she has a lot of like Brazilian, native Brazilian. So pretty dark skinned lady. And I didn't say anything. I just showed her pictures of Drow. I've got this on recording. I might do something with it someday. All I did is I said nothing. I just said, this is from D&D. This is from Dungeons and Dragons. And I just had her look. I said, look, look at this Drow. And I just showed her a bunch of like the main Drow art across the different editions. And then I asked her, describe this. How would you describe this race? And she's like, they look sexy. They're like a beautiful kind of sexy race, and they
Mm-hmm.
seem like powerful warriors and powerful sorcerers or something. Like they seem like they have powers. They seem like they have abilities and they could fight or do
Mm-hmm.
magic. And she kind of went through all those things. And I said, does this remind you of like real world black people? Does this remind you of like from actual real life planet Earth?
Mm-hmm.
And she said no. She's like,
Yeah. I would
well, she
say
thought about it. She thought about it. She's like, well,
Mhm.
no, like it didn't have a
Mhm.
African feel to it in any kind of way.
Yeah, I don't like I don't think I identified the Drow as like directly a racial representation of black people. Um, like I don't think that that's like that was the issue. Like I don't think orcs are
Mhm.
like specifically targeted towards like making me feel inferior or anything like that,
Sure.
right? Um,
Hold on. Let me just do the next step, and because this will help give the full context. So after she said that, she's like, "No, I could." She's like, "I could. I guess I could see why some people might think that, but no, it doesn't. Nothing about it seems like that." So then I said, "Okay, this Drow race in D&D is an evil race, and they worship a demon queen, a spider queen, and they have a lot of dark rituals, and they are slavers and murderers, and they'll sacrifice you to their spider god. They're nasty. They're really nasty. So does that bother you that it's a dark skinned race and their whole race is evil?" And she said, "Well, maybe." She asked me, "Are there light skinned races that are also all evil?" And I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, there are. There's like, ogres and whites and vampires, and there's various different. There's kind of all different colors of evil and good." And she's like, "Okay, well, I mean," and that satisfied it. Kind of her. This is where her non gamer side, I guess, is going to come out. At the end, she's just like, "People are actually getting mad about a game." She was like, "These are like," she's like, "People are like real world mad about fantasy monsters." I'm
yeah,
like, but I try to explain to her that it's it means something more to us than just a game.
yeah,
There's some personal connection. Okay, so go ahead. I just wanted to give you the full context with that.
yeah. No, okay. So I'll just restart. Like I think I have a similar like understanding. Like I also think it would be doing a disservice not to have like a black bad guy or something, right? Like you're just kind of like you said, you're going too hard on the sensitivities, so you're not creating real characters, right?
Would that be
And so
insulting to you if the company said, "Oh no, we can't make any dark skinned evil monsters or villains. No, no, we have to like you're not allowed to have that because we have to shield you or protect you." Would you?
yeah, I think that would be insulting. I think at very least, if it's not insulting, it's just poor writing in general, but also like that would be what we were saying of like going to PC, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like because it's not that in its honestly in its own way is racist, right? That I
I,
can't stand up for
I was just
myself.
gonna say that that's a point that some people have made already. That if you take
Mhm.
the um, anti-racism thing far enough, it just becomes racism again.
Yeah. So, um, yeah, I'm not like, and I'm one person. This is the disclaimer. If nobody
Right.
already knows that, I have one opinion, and I am one person. I don't speak for the entire Black community or the entire American community or anything like that, right?
Right.
But um, I do think that you know if you are basically like coddling me because you feel like I can't take care of myself, then you didn't learn anything, right? Like,
Mm-hmm. You've just
and
traded one
so
problem for another.
yeah, you're basically now just like fighting my battles for me instead of just like I wanted an ally. I didn't need an overlord in the other direction, right? I
Mm-hmm.
wanted a person who could say, "Hey, I don't necessarily like some of the things that are going on. Let's talk about it. How can I maybe not contribute to that? I don't need you to assume that something is going to offend me and hurry up and like I don't know, how should I say it? Like jump in front of the like bus for me because you think I can't like walk around a bus.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So like I think that self-sacrifice is a way to make yourself feel better. about maybe some things that you have going on versus like actually solving a real problem.
Mm-hmm.
So no, I think the idea that you can't have like black bad guys is also insulting.
Mm-hmm.
But I just was saying that generalizations in general are bad. So like saying this whole race is bad is bad. But saying like, you know, this group, this city is terrible, that may
Mm-hmm.
not be the full story. Let's unpack that.
Mm-hmm.
Also, your own homebrew story, you can make this culture totally different if you want, right? That's the whole point of the game, right? Is that
Mm-hmm.
I can just read this book and say this is stupid. I'm going to use the maps and make my own culture like around the maps,
Mm-hmm.
and nobody would even know, the difference, right? So, um, I guess that's kind of where I kind of trail off at
Sure.
with.
Let's see if we can do a little experiment here and
Hmm.
use some different examples of different creatures or races from Dungeons and Dragons. And
Hmm.
what does it seem like if that whole um, if that whole kind of creature is they're all evil? So
Hmm.
I'm going to start with like kind of the extreme end of things. Let's do uh, like a like a wraith, a specter.
Hmm.
Seems
Um,
seems fitting to me.
I could see how, like, so I'm not being a troll here, but I could see how, even like, so there's always an exception, right? Like there could be a wraith who died and wanted to save a country, and that was his like dying wish, and he couldn't go to rest for that, right? Technically, that could be like a lawful good wraith,
Mm,
but
that seems to me more of a ghost.
yeah, okay.
Wraith is more like they were
Is there
already
like
a horrible person, like a mass
ah?
murderer or something,
So I
and
wouldn't
they
say
and
that
they
that's
hate
the
the
wraith.
living. They hate the
Yeah,
living, and they want to kill all living things.
got it.
We
And I
could
would
we could
argue
all.
that that's not necessarily a race, though, right? So that is a, let's say, monster lore, right?
Mm-hmm.
Things things turn into monsters a lot of times because of consequences of them being assholes as a human, right? And that
Mm-hmm.
is like a moral philosophy of like, if you're a bad person, you're gonna get tortured and become this thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you're gonna eat people's eyeballs or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say that that's not necessarily a race,
Mm-hmm.
even if there are a bunch of wraiths that you can fight. That's not a that's not a race. That's not a culture.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is a monster. Like, and I think
What
before
about
just
Grell?
um, I'd have to let's Google what grells are.
It's like a brain with a beak and
Mhm.
these
Oh yeah.
tendrils thing, and they float along. They're
Hmm.
intelligent. They have a society. They have their own language. They have a culture.
Hmm.
They also want to eat people's brains, and they do a lot of really really nasty things. They're considered, I think it's lawful evil, all of them.
Hmm.
I mean,
Hmm.
there could be an exception. There always can be some exception in a world of magic and fantasy, but
Yeah.
it is, you know, typed as they typically lawful evil species or race or something.
Yeah. And I
Aberration.
mean, yeah, especially aberrations now. Like we know about some aberrations. And like the whole like, so I guess I'm gonna sound like I'm riding the fence here, but I think that like if we're gonna like kind of spoiler alert this and maybe get a bit ahead of it, I think what I'm more inclined to be cool with like generalizations of are like more monstrous things,
Mm-hmm.
or even like aberrant minds are supposed to be like, even us saying they're evil is kind of doing them an injustice because we're not really supposed to comprehend their thought process, right? So it's like
Mm-hmm.
the whole idea of aberration is that it's so far-fetched and alien to a human brain that if
Mm-hmm.
you try to understand it, you will go insane,
Mm-hmm.
essentially, right?
Yeah.
So it's like
Yeah.
even just like I think
Okay. What
generalizing.
about like a hill giant?
Mhm,
The hill giants are typically chaotic evil.
mhm.
They're stupid. They're lazy. They're gluttonous. They'll just eat everything in sight. They'll eat you. They'll eat your children. Eat your cow and your dog and you know and your mailbox.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I get that. Like, so I think that, like you're saying,
Giant creature type.
giant in general, or like, so we're specifically talking about hill giants.
Let's go with
So
hill giant. Sure.
yeah, because okay, yeah, and I think so. I guess I would have to kind of uh, I get the kind of idea of giant lore and like the ordning and stuff. Um, and I don't know, man. Like to be honest, like I don't know like why
Is
hill
this where it's kind
giants
of
are
hitting the
so.
gray area for you?
Yeah, so yes, it does hit the gray area. So I'll just start with that. But I don't. I think for me, I don't know like why hill giants are hill giants and like stone giants are stone giants. And I feel like I've probably read this at some point and forgot it. But like, um, I think at least how I run giants, like I think like the ordning or like the different types of giants give it enough diversity. But yeah, at the core, if we're gonna be honest, like yeah, you are generalizing this type of giant does this stuff, or this type of giant is smart and cool and you know, more inclined to be neutral or even good, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't know. Honestly, I don't I can see I think I think what I would say is that, you know, it's subjective. Like having like like even like just because I'm saying like I have issues with generalizing races, right? Like it's subjective to that group, right? Um and so like a
But you
group
don't feel
might be like,
particularly like bothered or annoyed that hill giants are chaotic
"Mhm.
evil, except whatever rare exceptions.
Yeah, no, I haven't
It's
to be honest,
enough
I
of
haven't
like a fantasy monster.
yeah, to be honest, I haven't really thought about giants in that way. Um or like
And they're also dumb. Did I mention that? They're
yeah,
very dumb.
yeah, they're
I think
very
they got
very
like
dumb. I
they
think
got like a 5 or a 6. I think maybe a 6
yeah,
intelligence.
I don't know.
Would you say orc is like just on the other side now of that gray area? Like we were on the like makes sense.
mhm.
It makes sense for the whole race, other than exceptions, to be evil. And then the hill giants kind of like, all right, it's gray, complicated, but probably works. And then orc
Yeah.
is like this on the other side of the line, like you've just crossed the line.
Yeah, I guess I wouldn't put up a picket sign for a giant for sure.
Uh
Uh
huh.
I would say that the orc thing wouldn't even really be super huge deal if they didn't go so hard into like trying to make them worse. Like like so I would say I think maybe it's more even like now that I'm thinking about it, maybe it's more like the playable character kind of situation.
Mm-hmm.
Um I don't know. Honestly, I'm working through this, so if it sounds like I'm figuring this out as I think about it, it's cuz I am.
Well, that's part of the
Um
reason this conversation is like people. I don't hear people having conversations like this very often, and it might be because of the being just uncomfortable, or like you said, people don't want to be wrong. But it's like you got to kind of just talk out loud and get your thoughts out of your head and say dumb things. That's about the only real way to muddle through this. Otherwise,
absolutely.
you're just stuck in your head. And like I was started writing all these notes, and I'm like, what am I doing? I'm just like mentally masturbating here. Like, what the hell do I know about what I know, and what am I really going to actually say? Like, there's a big difference between some like kind of tangent you go off in your own, like a it's almost a rant, kind of a rant you go off in your own mind when you're writing something or talking to yourself. But then when you actually have when you talk to an actual person, then you're like, oh, do I actually believe that? Like, do I
Hmm.
truly believe that, or was that just me, just farting around with those thoughts?
Yeah, I genuinely value being able to formulate your own opinion, and that comes with people challenging said opinion, right? And so, um, yeah, I didn't come here with an agenda per se, and I don't think you did either. And I think that is the ability to, like, I think like I said, we have been gaming for a couple years at this point, so we have some sort of inherent understanding of who the other person is. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not like we're even debating. Like, if
I
this was.
thought that we might have some more disagreement,
Mhm.
but I think we have quite a bit of common ground. It would
Yeah,
seem.
and so I would say that, um I guess, how should I say this? Being able to get through the discomfort of not understanding something with a person who you can trust isn't gonna just assume that you're trying to offend them
Mm-hmm.
or trying to uh over talk them for just, I guess, self gratification, allows for constructive conversations. Like, I think this is more of a, like, even towards the end, like, this is a thought experiment that challenges what I think and also like what you think, but in an environment where we both get something from it versus we have to defend our ideals, right?
Yeah. Well, the idea, like our goal here, is like, let's see if we can figure some stuff out and maybe learn
Hmm.
something. So, why do you, a person, why does a person
Hmm.
think whatever thing? Why do you believe certain thing? We don't always know why we believe something, and maybe you
Hmm.
don't know exactly why the orc race, being typically chaotic evil, rubs you the wrong way. Maybe you've thought about it some, but like, where did that come from? And well,
Hmm.
here you are, kind of sending your troops out onto the battlefield of the mind,
Hmm.
and are they victorious? Do you not have as many troops as you thought you had? Do they
Yeah.
like did they get their asses kicked and they gotta like go back and you're like, oh yeah, we gotta like rethink our strategy?
So I think, and this is kind of where I think this is kind of where the, like, so let's just say, like, video gamey, right? Like, if this was just a video game with mechanics and, you fight some monsters, you kill them, you get loot, right? I would be less inclined to, like, analyze it as much as if I was the actual person. Like,
Hmm,
when we get really immersed into our game, right?
very
So
much.
when my character does the thing, I am experiencing it almost as if I'm doing it. Like, I don't have magic, but I have the agency to, like you said, possibly make that decision at a future date. And so I think that's where it gets a little grimy to me, especially when people, like, are like lawful good and like doing really racist shit, right? It's like, do you think a lawful good person does things like that? Right? And so it's like, um
A
so
lawful
it's
good
like
character
more of,
with flaws would.
yeah, yeah, and they have flaws, which is a thing, right? You can even unpack that, right? So it's like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not perfect. I think honestly, the character alignment spectrum leaves a lot of flaws in that regard, where it's like nobody's actually completely lawful good, right? So it's
It's a
like,
yeah, the alignment system is a great system. But once you like really look at the specifics,
Hmm.
it the lines get blurry,
Yeah, and so
which is fine.
like
I mean, I
yeah,
don't think that's not like any that's not like a defect of it or anything.
yeah, I would say my character Ari has danced around most of the lines of chaotic except for evil in our campaign.
You have, yeah, you have not exhibited anything evil, or
Mhm.
that's probably the one area that you haven't ventured into much.
Yeah. And so
More towards chaos than towards law, but you have had
mhm.
some lawful
Yeah.
sides to you as well, because
Yeah.
he has a method about things, and he has certain convictions that he holds to. He has kind of a code that he sticks with,
Yeah.
but he also lets himself be, you know, like he lets loose and gets kind of wild and rascally too at times.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly.
But
So
your point is very similar to how I see things as well. That D&D is very different from a video game in that
mhm.
you can um, connect with the character on a deeper level. It can
Mhm.
have some other meaning to it than just a game.
And I think that might be the argument for your wife as to like why we get so huffy about stuff like that,
Well, you know what's
right?
funny? I tried playing D&D with her twice, and she didn't like it because she felt like she got too absorbed into her character, and that made her feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Just
I
the
can see.
fact that she was absorbed into a fantasy world, that made her uncomfortable.
Mhm.
It wasn't like whatever subject matter that was going on. She was like, I
Yeah.
don't like that feeling. I like being here in the real world, and like I have control of myself.
Yeah. Um so yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of where it is for me is like if it was more of a casual kind of experience and some of it is, and I think that's like fine, you know, it it abstracts a lot of those real world problems from the game. But if you live in that world, you're not abstracted from it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why it's like if I think it's very gratifying for me to be able to attack some of the things that have caused me like issues in my life and be empowered to like defeat that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think everybody wants to fight evil. That's most of like unless you're playing an evil character, you usually want to kill a bad guy, right? That's kind of like the common denominator here.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
And
you know,
even a lot of evil characters don't see themselves as evil. They think they are the
yeah,
one who really sees how things work. And if only they can get their way and kind of put that onto the world, they'll make things right.
hmm, yeah. So, you know, um, yeah, I guess like to summarize, I guess that's kind of what I feel about it is like, you know, I'm very immersed in this world and I want to change things that maybe my character, which may not be me, right, disagree with. And so, like that's where it kind of just gets like, I'm here, I'm seeing this stuff, and you might even see it from a different perspective than the words on the paper that describe that character class or race or whatever.
Absolutely. I mean, for one thing, there's only so much you can put into the book, unless you want your book to be like 1,000 pages and impossible for somebody to read. The
Emporium.
Yeah,
It's not
hey,
impossible. I was joking. It's not
I did go
impossible.
overboard with the book, but I didn't go that far overboard.
Yeah, I love honestly the amount of content and the different type of content that you put in the book. So I'm just giving you shit.
It's sort of
But
like
real thick.
the the virgin who he's always wanted to be with a woman, and he's like had that building up for years and years, and then like he finally gets to be with one and just kind of like, "Whoa!" Well, not to be too
Hmm.
graphic, but just kind of like loses a bit of control of himself. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
like, I had all these ideas and things that I'd written and developed for a long time, and it was like,
Mhm.
oh, making a book is gonna put all my stuff in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not doing
Nah, but
that
I'm
again.
I'm just
Probably,
giving you
probably
shit.
not doing that again.
It's a good book,
Thank you.
but
I
yeah.
I
So,
put my heart and soul into that book, man.
but yeah. So I think I mean, unless you have some other
Yeah, why
talking
don't we wrap
points,
up there? This was pretty damn cool, I gotta say. So I'm glad that we had this talk, and hopefully other people will get something out of it.
yeah. Hopefully.
All right. Well, thank you very much for being like willing and open to this, and I'm sure I'll talk to you soon, man.
Awesome, dude. Yeah. Thanks for having me.